Welcome to Collegial Conversations with Diana Clark, the professional webinar series that offers clinical and personal perspectives on issues that are common, but often not talked about. Here is today's Collegial Conversation.
Thank you for joining a Collegial Conversation with Diana Clark. Joining today is Bryce Bjork. Bryce is a founder, designer, and full-stack developer. He holds a bachelor's degree from Yale and has been active in startups ever since high school. He is passionate about using technology for good and promoting education and awareness of adolescent mental and brain health in memory of his brother Chase. After losing Chase to mental illness, Bryce co-founded Brain Health Bootcamp, a nonprofit that helps schools measure and increase mental health literacy. Thank you so much for joining us today, Bryce. I'm going to now pass the conversation over to Diana.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome, Bryce. I appreciate you joining me today. I want to start out with our most powerful guests start with this personal story. And so I appreciate the fact that that is your origin story too, as we talk about in superhero land. Can you tell me a little bit about Chase?
Yeah. Well, Chase is really the inspiration for the work that I do at Brain Health Bootcamp. And he's my younger brother, 3 years younger than me. And, I remember Chase as the brother that gave the biggest hugs. He was never the first person to let go. So he'd hold you there actually past when you were kind of ready to close it out. But he was an awesome brother and an amazing person, super kind and empathetic. And 2.5 years ago, we lost him to mental illness. And a couple of years before that, he started showing some symptoms of mental distress. And it was a long journey, as anyone that has a family member that has gone through this can speak to. And there were several rounds of misdiagnosis and, working through trying to find the right medication. And ultimately, a couple weeks before his passing, we got the correct diagnosis, which was schizophrenia. And so it was a very hard 2 years watching the brother that I knew and loved so much really experience a super impactful illness, and a very difficult thing as a family because we didn't know how to best support him, and we did our best, but ultimately he succumbed to the serious illness that he had, and it ended up being terminal. And so that 2.5 years ago, my family and my world really changed forever when we lost him. And my background is really in software engineering and in building apps and websites. And when we lost Chase, it really made me reevaluate kind of what I was focused on. And for about a year after losing Chase, my family and our community really did a lot of reflection on who he was and how this had happened, and we were really interested in doing something for kids like Chase, try to make a positive impact in his memory. And there were so many people in Concord, which is where I'm from, outside of Boston, that really loved him and wanted to serve his memory. And so in the aftermath of losing him, there was really a groundswell of support to do something meaningful. And that's where Brain Health Bootcamp comes from. And we decided to focus on education and awareness of adolescent mental health and mental illness. And, there were so many things that I learned after losing Chase that I never knew before then.
Can you give me an example of one of those lessons that you have learned that shape-shifted your view of your brother or of mental illness?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the most powerful things, and I'll describe this qualitatively and then quantitatively. At his funeral and after losing him, I can't tell you how many close friends and people in our network came and opened up to us that they too had a family member that was struggling, and I had no idea. These are people that I'd been close with, and I was just taken back by how widespread mental illness really is. We've learned that 1 in 3 teens is struggling with their mental health, and I was just blown away to find that out, especially given how it doesn't seem like that maybe at first glance. It's something that there still is a lot of hesitation to open up about, but that was something that just stood out to me, and still I find really motivating and concerning just how prevalent mental illness really is.
So in the years since the pandemic, that number has elevated significantly beyond 30%. It is now closer to 50% of teens identify with clinical symptoms of mental health crises. Yeah. Yeah,
it's crazy. The pandemic has really accelerated this, and not in a good direction.
What do you do? What do we do? Yeah, the pandemic happened. Our teens are really struggling. What does your boot camp do?
Yeah, so we were struck by how widespread this is. As you said, it's closer to 50% that are struggling. Of those that are struggling, only about half are seeking help. So that was one of the more concerning things to us as well, as we were studying the space and trying to learn about how we could make a difference. And yet, 3/4 of all lifetime mental illness will start in adolescence. So if you just think about the setup for this, you have a huge number of kids that are struggling. You have half of them not seeking help. And we're talking about illnesses that are serious illnesses that will could potentially turn into chronic conditions. So it was clear to us
during a time when the brain is completely growing and shrinking neurons and really forming its adult brain.
Yeah. So we were struck by just how this period in adolescence is just such an inflection point. And yet schools and the conversation just hadn't been addressing this in a way that we thought was adequate. So I reflect back on my high school experience, and I learned so much more about like STDs or STIs than I did about mental illness or anxiety, depression, any of these really common disorders. And so what Brain Health Bootcamp does is we've really focused on mental health literacy. And we provide a 1-hour program to high schools that increases mental health literacy. So basically, students will go on their laptop and spend an hour learning about mental health, learning about coping skills, and pre and post the content. They are taking a validated assessment where we're measuring their mental health literacy levels. And what we're trying to show is that even by taking just 1 hour of classroom time to talk about this and try to normalize that this is part of the human experience, that it affects a lot of people and that it's totally okay and there are pathways to seek help, that we will increase mental health literacy, promote early help seeking, and help more students take that early action and get on the right track while they're in this period of as you mentioned, just really significant brain change.
That is really phenomenal. Are parents involved at all in this literacy programming?
Yes. So we have focused on making our programming accessible to students. So we try to produce everything at about a 6th grade reading level. But of course, that means it also works really well for adults. So many of the schools that we partner with do share the program with parents. It's a little bit hard for us to corral all of the parents to take 1 hour of programming the way that teachers and counselors at a school can for those students. But certainly getting parents aligned and knowledgeable about this is a really important part of the puzzle, especially because we're talking about minors. To take that action, a lot of times that does involve the parent. Yeah.
Right. What is the hopeful thing you see on the horizon about adolescent mental health? What are you seeing that might actually counterbalance a lot of the news we're hearing about the distress?
Well, I think the fact that we are talking about it is very hopeful. I think that there's a big normalization that's happening. The younger generations are not afraid to call this out and say that this is important. It's becoming a lot more acceptable for people to take time to focus on their mental health. It is, I think, increasingly being seen as a part of health more broadly. So it's not, a character flaw that you are suffering from depression, for example. This is a part of life, and a lot of people are affected. So I think that there's a big wave of destigmatization that is really important and will drive a lot of early help seeking. I also see a lot of really exciting research on treatment pathways. There's a lot. I'm not an expert on any of this.
Go ahead.
There's some amazing research around psychedelics, around cognitive behavioral therapy being applied by a chatbot. And so I think that the options for people that are struggling are getting better and more widely accessible. So if you have more people that are aware that this is something important and taking action, and you also have better pathways for them to take that action, I think we'll see a really big shift in the right direction.
I do too. I think the more we talk about, frankly, feelings, does your program talk about what are feelings? I mean, I think we need to get so rudimentary about how do feelings experience in our bodies even. I think that we put on a mask and say everything is okay, and kids go to school and it's not.
Yeah. We certainly do talk about feelings, and I think there's a lot of things that they're just unspoken, and you hope that people know all of these things, but if you're never talking about them, or you're never addressing them, never teaching them, then there's no, you can't be sure that people will actually know.
Right.
So, yeah.
There was a Yale course I took, the Yale course of well-being. Do you know it?
Oh, yes, with Laura Santos.
Yes. So I was really interested in what that was as an offering, and I found it very, very smart. But I also heard she's put out one for adolescents now. Yes.
Yeah. The Science of Wellbeing lab there is doing some awesome work. And Yale has been, I think, a really early leader in the social, emotional side of education. Our university president, I believe he was the person who coined EQ, emotional intelligence, and so I think it's increasingly the people are waking up to the fact that emotional intelligence is a really important part of being successful, and more schools are devoting time to it, and some amazing academics and researchers are creating courses around it.
Yeah.
So that's really exciting too.
So tell me, how do people get a hold of you to be able to advocate for their school systems that they have a program like yours? How do people get part of this movement? Yeah,
so we do have a website, of course, brainhealthbootcamp.org. we're a 501c3 nonprofit, so we love partnering with schools with after-school programs, and check out our website. We have some good information there that should help direct people.
Wonderful. If you were a parent, what would be the one piece of advice you would want to offer them about their teenage kids from what you've learned from this experience?
I think that there's a common and understandable reaction when your child is struggling, which is that you want to avoid causing waves. It can be easy and conflict avoidant to kind of not address something. But deep down, if your child or your sibling is struggling, you will kind of know, you'll have a sense that, something's not right. And I would say that it is worth the short-term pain to set your kid up on the right track. So I wouldn't be afraid of having difficult conversations. And I would say that when you notice something that's not quite right, you should take action and really try to course correct. These are illnesses that compound with time. If you have episodes, each episode makes the underlying illness harder to treat. And so I think it's an important thing that when you see something that's not quite right, that's the time you have the chance to intervene and to try and course correct. And I think a lot of people try to take the easier path in the short term, but end up paying the long-term price.
Yeah. That's really sound advice. I think parents are terrified. They don't, it isn't just that it's the easier course. It is the course that their brain tells them everything is okay.
Yeah.
Because it's so scary right now.
Yeah. It's a really hard thing to accept that you have a child that's struggling. I think there's a big element of just, you want everything to be okay. And so it's so much easier psychologically to maintain this kind of illusion that that everything will be fine, that time will heal this. And yet it's so important that you do take early action.
Yeah. Great advice. Well, Bryce, anything else you want us to know before we say goodbye today?
I'm not sure if there's anything else. I would say that it's a really important that we bring mental health into classrooms and into family conversations, and that there is reason for hope, as you mentioned, that things are trending in the right direction. There's a lot of work to be done, and so if people are watching and want to do something in their local community, in their school, that the time is now, and everyone will really benefit from your action.
Yay. Thank you, Bryce Bjork. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining this webinar. Tune in to more webinars and sign up for our newsletter at o'connorpg.com.